Welcome to the cemetery, boys and girls. You better buckle up in my hearse, because we're gonna go and visit your new home in one of my freshly dug up graves. So pay attention, sit tight, and enjoy the ride. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate you coming to check out the stories I narrate. Please subscribe and like, and possibly share my work if you enjoy it. Thank you. This story is written by Dlschindler. Swallow the Spiders. It's a pure horror story designed for your listening pleasure. Flies of amber shadow danced in the air above, like a tiny aerial ballroom of thousands. Their buzz filled my ears, and their vigour made me grin. They were going to lay their eggs on the mulberry below. Alone they descended, each of them to create tiny pyramids. After the last egg, then to lapse and become fertiliser for the plant, as the wings above sent a breeze to roll the dead from the leaves. They were ethnic, perfect, mine. I called the little silkworms my children of the dawn. Their webs were as light and as playful and innocent as newborn spiderlings. Their swarm was a tapestry as they cocooned their vegetable prey, as a colony of gypsy moth larvae might, if left to nature's plan. My plans for the Afghan would prevail if God watched the moth as she danced in the air near the flame. I mused, if only the moth knew of God's plans, if only. I could hear it in the silence of their wings. God's plan? Your plan? I know this. I had created them from the building blocks of life. To them, I was the source of their world, my new world, in a home of glass, a microcosmos. All I had to do was open a window and let them go forth and multiply and be fruitful. I would be their God. I would show my wrath, my mercy, and my glory, my new world. Pacing back and forth and waiting for the third birth of my children. Why should Afnik be born 3 times? Would anyone disregard that such rebirth was truly a work of a calculated perfection? The Afnik were born from an egg, a cocoon, and last from their atophistic acrinid stage. It was the final development when they matured their wings and grew their eggs. Mutations of the sensitive eggs at the 3rd stage manifested. The spider would develop a gland that it calcified a variety of toxins, diseases, and parasites I introduced to the 2nd stage Afnik. When it could fly and lay eggs, the membrane would become infused with the calcified gland's memory and harden with the changes to the fertile cells. This gland, harvested from living Afnik, prevents the development of any immunities and ensures their offspring will have to start again with collecting samples from their environment. The genius of my creation is that this gland can be made into a drug that is compatible with the human fetus during the first trimester. Any toxins, diseases or parasites that the apnic can resist would imbue our unborn with their immunities. Such a child would be grown in a controlled incubation. Such a child would pass on their genetic improvements most effectively to an exact copy. The clones would be perfect, my creation. What then would be the purpose of a woman carrying a child? What then would be the purpose of the body of woman? The new children would be physically perfect without the aging and emotional weakness of sexuality. They would be gifted with the longevity and consistency of a perfect human, absent of gender. The drug as a serum, a pale pink liquid, was meant not for the metamorphosis of an unmutated adult. I knew it would alter my cells anyway. The mutagen had properties of a virus, re-encoding DNA rapidly, and to shape the host into something else. There was no way for my body to reject it unless it killed me during my second puberty. Holding the serum to the light, I felt dizzy. I had never expected to be able to craft such an elixir, let alone benefit from its divine power. It should not come possible, yet stem cells and my own ancient designs had met and made the impossible into the possible. So often I had seen such a thing happen. The immorality of science and the greed of its priesthood often made nightmares a reality. The fruit on the vine was ripe. I held my moment in emptiness. I stared at the syrupy bit still coating the inside of the test tube. The taste was like almonds, and the smell of grass, and perhaps a hint of sweetness, an aftertaste, sickly, sweet and subtle. I held it up to the light, noting the tiny bubbles that had formed around the edge. I felt the triumph before the first pains. I felt as though I were a god, and I had just created myself. I had become a god. Finally, I could control my world for the rest of my existence, which would be extensive. I had always believed in myth and was rewarded for my faith. If there were no other gods, it no longer mattered. I had become a god. My life would not end. I had taken one little sip. I had drank deeply. I had known the substance. My mouth burned, and my body began to cramp and twist. I lunged and fell and gagged. The world I would know as a god swam like drunken dizziness. Indeed, I had drank too deeply of it. I had touched divinity and become a thrashing and chumming body of agony. A mind of swirling madness, spider's venom. When I opened my eyes, I could only remember 100 hours of suffering. I blinked and tried to stand up. I was weak with thirst and crawled to the sink. There I drank again and became full, the liquid balancing within me and the access not waiting for a controlled release. A god in a puddle of piss answered the shrill cry of a phone. Was I a god? We had some kind of conversation. I wasn't there for most of it. My head was buzzing and felt like it was filled with spider webs. What science calls a blasphemy? I heard myself reiterate my rephrase of my colleagues' complaints. What science calls a mutagen? Dr. Magdalene. My colleague sounded worried.
I call a breakfast smoothie. I chuckled weirdly and hung up. Most of the changes began slowly while I vomited and slept. I noticed that my appetite and strength came back quickly. At first, I just felt the vitality and the vigour of it. Then my senses began to grow more acute. This more of a torment than it might sound, for my mind could not process and contain such an amount of observations, not at first, so I went a little mad. A cruel hunger overtook me, predatory and spiteful. Everything looked like food, even the mulberry. I thought about the Silk Road, the Crusades, and the time of the Secret. None of it bothered me anymore. I had become the new Silk Road and Secret. There were no more Crusaders. When I realised I would not become some kind of giant spider battling warriors in medieval armour in my burning living room as I had dreamed, I could only laugh. The great change of my body did come though, my rebirth. I gasped, pulling what I had spun from my face. I stared at the sores and rot of my limbs. The cold memory told me I had deliberately spun a cocoon around myself. It was snowing outside. I discovered that 46 days had gone by and I had hibernated somehow, growing and changing. Actually, it was more like fermenting and dissolving. I looked like I was back from the dead. The strangeness overwhelmed me and some part of my mind intent of survival, some animal part took over. I was sitting there twitching. I stared at the pyramid of eggs. They were large and translucent. I saw my actual children in them, twisted parodies of Afnik and human. I could not remember the secrets. Then I looked at my work. Afnik were made from the building blocks of life. I had made them. I looked at the red cross on the white shield, a crusader ready to destroy and ravage the unholy, one god or another. I realised there would always be a need for fire. Some part of me was not me, controlling me, being me. I was not me. I was this thing. No longer human, no longer myself. I could not be a god. I could not be human anymore. I must, as I have some thought left, recall what work a god had.
I must recall where a human reached out and touched God, and God recoiled in horror. I must say, all there is left to say about what I have done to this world, what I have created, there is still fire. Fire comes for me and for all of it. The world I made must burn, and in the end, the unhatched must be destroyed. It's the only way to regain my humanity. Thank you for watching and listening to my narration of this fantastic story, written by and attributed to, once again, Dlschindler, and it's named Swallow the Spiders. So, until the next time you think you want to be immortal or try and be any way near a god, please think of all the negative things that can happen. So the next time we meet, stay safe and stay sane. Goodbye.